80% of our unhealthy years are preventable, right? That's the horsemen that we all know. And they translate to the metabolic health, cognition health, heart health, immune health, to all the diseases that we want to prevent. Basically everything except for contagious diseases and getting hit by a bus. But we're not practicing it because the system would not support it. The data was not accessible. Even trends currently, today, 2026 is around the corner.
What if the very system designed to protect our health is blind to the most urgent threats? In an age of infinite data, we are systematically missing the clues that predict the diseases we fear most, that is, the longer-term chronic disease, silent passengers. Now, our guest today, Guy Leitersdorf, discovered this firsthand when his father, despite being monitored by the best executive healthcare services, was diagnosed with a late-stage lung cancer that perhaps could have been detected early and prevented. A former data scientist who built algorithms to predict our clicks, Guy saw a hidden connection. The same technology used to sell us products could be repurposed to save our lives. So he set out to decode 20 years of longitudinal data from blood tests and doctor visits and even daily steps, searching for the patterns our system ignores. What he found was, well, a profound truth about preventing illness. Today on the DNA of Things, we go underneath to reveal that code.
Guy Leitersdorf is the founder and CEO of Longevity AI, a pioneering company translating massive data sets into predictive health intelligence aimed at preventing disease before it starts, combining expertise in AI, behavioral science, with a deeply personal motivation rooted in loss. Guy's mission is to give humanity 10 billion additional healthy years. Now, before entering the world of longevity science, he led data and algorithmic innovation at IronSource, where he honed the ability to model human behavior at scale. And today he's applying those same analytical insights to, well, the most difficult of all, the human challenge, most important human challenge of all, and that is extending vitality and wellness. So here on the DNA of Things today, Guy's going to share, how data, empathy, and innovation converge to reimagine healthcare, and inviting us to see prevention not as privilege, but as purpose. And his journey is one of transformation from technology to change maker, really embodying the podcast mission to understand, activate, and to become. All right, your reputation precedes you, Guy. This is not your first rodeo. It's so great, and what an honor to welcome you back.
Thank you, Jeremy. An honor and pleasure to be here.
So you were amongst the very few in the beginning. I think you were number 3 as we're approaching to episode 100, where I've diligently committed to one episode a week for the last 2 years or so. A lot's changed. When we met, I would say it was a lot more than an idea even when we met, but now it's some pretty exciting traction that you have. That's why we've been reconnected. One of my previous guests, who we'll talk about, Christy Berry, CEO of Genics, was singing your praises. So I said, gosh, I got to reach out. It is wonderful. But before we dive into what you've got going on right now, maybe a little bit of a recap as to how you got here, because your story is pretty amazing. Not least of all your personal story, but then also the whole transformation or interdisciplinary thought leadership, taking human behavior from a marketing world and applying it to a health world. I think is amazing. And so how do we use marketing and human psychology in a way that's impactful to add billions of years to lives? So maybe just a quick reset on how you got here, and then we'll dive into some of the really cool projects and partnerships you got going on.
Yeah, sure. So it's been quite a journey. Back then, I was working for a company that does advertising technology called IronSource, third largest in the world after Google and Facebook. I was leading their AI. So my job was quite simple, looking at data from billions of people, scrolling their devices on a daily basis, seeing what I can get you to click on or purchase. But, at some point, I bet many of us right now in the call, in the audience, are having iPhones. You might have been asked if you want a new app to follow you around while you're on other apps. And most likely you said no. So for us in the data science department, it was a big deal. We could no longer know 20 years back what you clicked or purchased on. And all we had to do is your current experience with the device. So we said, you know what, instead of from click to install to purchase, how about we just optimize our experience, retention? The team figured out amazing things when we shifted the focus. Gen Z right before bedtime, amazing time to convert into action. Older adult, better luck when you're commuting to work or during your lunch break. Team did amazing. It got us a much bigger market share comparing to the competition, Google and Facebook. And I was lucky enough to be on the journey from joining from a 750 million valuation 2 years later with this iPhone update to a 12 bill Nasdaq IPO. So I had the real privilege of being on a roller coaster that hinges on privacy as a service. When people get their privacy, Apple is 20% of the devices in the market, 70% of revenue. That's not a coincidence. Giving people privacy and in return, you're committed to optimizing their experience is a real privilege. And for me, it taught a lesson. It might be harder, but it's worthwhile. Great place to work for, consistently in the top places, great, wonderful people. But, life happens. And one sunny day, my father was diagnosed with a late stage lung cancer. Even though he was monitored by the best executive healthcare in Israel, my family, my uncle is the dean of medicine of the Hebrew University back then, running 2 departments in the hospital, Jerusalem Hospital Hadassah. So we had the best people, but still it was missed. And a non-medical person, and I think now in the call, most of our listeners are wiser than I was. Proactive care, preventing disease, it really depends on the physicians who are looking at your case. What's their specialties? What data are they looking at? And today, what agents are helping out? And or it's in the scope, or it simply isn't. So I did the only thing I know how to do. Quit my job a month later after the diagnosis and nerded it out on some data. I started with the CDC data of the United States. And then we were privileged enough to be the only company in the world to have the access to 2 of the largest HMOs in Israel. Millions of people, decades of data, full medical records, nothing like it. The next data set of continuous longitudinal data is 10th the size. And we built Florence, our AI. We got her to read all the medical literature ever written. And what she figured out blew my mind. Jeremy, 80% of our unhealthy years are preventable, right? That's the horsemen that we all know. And they translate to the metabolic health, cognition health, heart health, immune health, to all the diseases that we want to prevent. Basically, everything except for contagious diseases and getting hit by a bus. But physicians were not practicing it because the system would not support it. The data was not accessible. Even trends currently, today, 2026 is around the corner. There's no trends, which is much more meaningful than a point in time. And of course, we're not having the full picture. That's what physicians are supposed to do when we meet them. We want them to take care of our complete health. So with their journey, we've created Florence Nightingale, our AI. We have a clinic management platform. We're the only one that I know of that saves over 50% of doctors' time because we take the full picture, not just one thing about the heart or one great habit. And we're giving members what I want for myself, what I would have loved my father to have, and what I want all my loved ones to have. Your best friend is coach, because Florence knows everything about you, all the clinical information and lifestyle information. All my clinical data, where I slept last night and how I'm feeling now. Not many AIs are trusted today to know this information about us. Try to count them. I don't have anyone else for that. Comes from my practitioner. And she can guide me on that 1-2 thing I actually want to achieve next from the things I actually love to do that my doctors would love for me to apply. So we can talk a lot today, but I think this is the gist of it. It's just about how can we deliver great service for doctors, and how does it translate to a healthcare I actually apply, and that's good for my health.
Amazing. I had mentioned at the top of the call that it had been just coming up over 2 years where we had chatted, and again, I'm sorry for your loss, your father. When did he pass?
3 years ago.
3 years
Unfortunately,
ago.
it was too late to do anything meaningful. It's
Mhm.
very sad.
So you and I had chatted about 1 year after that, and you were full into longevity AI. Okay. And then now here we are 2 years later, and you've launched with some, really, really exciting partnerships. And I think maybe it's important to take a moment, pause here on one of the things that I heard, because it really resonates with me insofar as, you are building something that you wanted your family to have, something that your family uses. Similarly, my mother was, she was diagnosed with, MS when I was 14. And yeah. And that's like, her first message to us, her kids, 5 kids, was, "Oh, don't worry, it's not genetic." And so I was like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I just want to save mom. And like, what is this genetics thing? And I would say that's what kind of sent me down probably the rabbit hole academically. And you learn, very quickly, like back at that time. So she told me that it would have been 1993. So like, I think that's before email. Oh my goodness.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I remember writing to professors and college professors, reading, publicly available research, and understanding things about, pro-inflammatory compounds and autoimmunity and icosanoid balance and, all the things that you might do with nutrition. And, of course, we know how convoluted nutrition science is, because it's so multifactorial with the variables that you've got to consider. But now here we are, enter AI, the tools of today, really what made, what was desired previously possible today. And, like my mother died tragically before her time. And, I started to learn about things like, how the genome works, how the microbiome works, how, there are now ways of making the unseen seen insofar as this, kind of molecular, biology, whether it's, DNA, epigenetics, microbiome, blood data, but then also your behavioral data. Cause that's the tough thing too, is like, if a lot of times we don't even know our own behavior. And that's why we buy things that these, it's these things are marketed to us. I jokingly say to, my family and friends, it's like, be on alert, because these marketing technologies, they've, it's like you said, for Gen Zs, it's in the morning, for X, it's later in the day. It's like, basically what it is, it's like late night television 24/7. And when I say late night television, I mean, you're generally up and you're in unrest and you're vulnerable. And you're not necessarily being sold the thing that you need. It might sound good, right? So imagine being sold the thing that you actually need. And that's like, I think that's where you're going with Florence Nightingale.
Exactly. What your doctor would have loved you to do. What's better than that? Clinically proven to extend your health span and feeling good tomorrow. For me, it's refreshing to work for an AI, to develop and raise an AI that the sole goal is to give you better health and a better life according to the goals you set yourself. I think that 1-2 years from now, if you look at the opportunities of AI that will serve us, that will be like our operating system, and all the other services will be like apps, just getting the right amount of information to provide the data. I think that when you have to choose the AI that you want to tell a lot of information to, and like you said just now, is heavily influencing your decision making, whether you know it or not. It's really important to choose the AI that has the right goals.
Yeah. Well, and then like a lot of the things that you said at the beginning was like, hey, these things, these 80% of the root causes are avoidable, effectively. And that might be shocking. And then once you start to describe it, it becomes less so. You're like, oh, well, cardiovascular disease, neurological. It's like, okay, yeah, those are, the horsemen, I think, as you called it. Correct. And so, okay, no surprise, they're coming. But then, well, the what you can do about it now is very different. And, I'll just share an anecdote that I'm able to do in my family, which I think, there's what you're doing at scale and certainly an opportunity for collaboration. So one of the things that I was struggling with, as it turns out, once I got more information, I thought it was since March of this year, 2025, was just like, real, like kind of, cognitive fog, kind of a numbness in my sinus, tinnitus in my ear, and, like burning sensation on my skin. And so what am I thinking? I'm like, oh, that's probably MS, right? Like, or that all lines up. And I'm like getting in with Chat GPT, and it's like, it's giving me confirmation bias, and it's giving me hallucinations, and it's not really curated. It's getting better. I'm not saying it isn't, but when I actually created a closed system with just my data and my conversations with my physicians, what I was able to do was kind of some of the noise. So like certain things about my genetic predispositions as it relates to pro-inflammatory pathways. Think about things like your MTHFR gene, histamine response. And then also taking into consider other environmental variables. And as it came back to, I was able to, so one of the things my practitioner said is like, hey, let's just check out the mold thing, right? And I did a mold tox screen, and lo and behold, it came back as positive for black mold. And, now I've got this implementation protocol, but I can see, looking at my genetics and my bloods, how it was exacerbated and unique to me. And if left unchecked, it would have looked like a pro-inflammatory autoimmune, issue triggered by the environment. Then the interesting thing is, as I started to do more kind of a history, I was like, oh yeah, I remember when I was doing my, grad school, I was renting from like slum landlords. And I remember that year where I had allergies like crazy, and I never have allergies. And I remember pulling out the fridge being like, what the heck's what black mold everywhere, right? And I remember, moving. And anyway, the point is, you can start to kind of document, all that, where I had to like think about what happened 20 years ago, like how the heck, and so I really want to, talk about the power of the longitudinal data, especially as it relates to, effectively habit change, right? Because in the end, you're given this set of things to do. And I don't want to do that. I'm like, oh, I don't want to go and get a glutathione drip. I don't want to go and take frankincense nasal spray. It friggin' hurts. And now I got to get all these supplements, and do I know if it's even going to work? And it's like, well, this is a lot different than, your buddy telling you to do a cold plunge, or to do hot yoga. It is like, you're trying to actually solve a problem, like get my cognition back, get my pain to go away. And you integrate these things under the guise or guidance of a practitioner. Now, I've struggled with the practitioner piece, and maybe we can talk about, how you are very selective and how you choose your practitioners, because my practitioners are everywhere. There's my GP, there's my ND, there's my athletic therapist, there's my, there's all these people. And so there's a fair amount of diligence that I've had to do to collect all that dialogue, harmonize it with my data, and essentially centralize it, for my family. So, okay, this is what I've done for me. Now I can do it for my wife, and I can do it for my daughter. But it seems to me like there's, I might be getting off track here, but this solution this point solution that you're providing to clinicians. There's a consumer interface, so you're bringing it home, I would suspect, right? So is there a way for the dialogue to continue outside of the clinic to have this kind of positive feedback loop? And so maybe let's talk a little bit about like that. What is the end user experience as a starting point, and then who are your choice providers that you've partnered with today in your 2 years of existence?
Of course. So I think you started really, for me, beautifully with the consumer, with everybody. We're like, no, we want to deliver 10 billion healthy years, at least one per person, and then the sky's the limit. So the question is, and you spoke about different types of doctors and a nutritionist and a gym expert, and maybe you want to talk even about how do I choose my dish at the restaurant, and how do I go grocery shopping, and all has to connect. Because if it doesn't connect, it will not succeed. You cannot have 5 different professionals saying 5 different things and then expect a person to be motivated for one good, healthy habit. So the real way to deliver longevity for all is to be able to have a concise longevity plan that's fun to follow and that's trusted by your team. And that actually goes back to what you talked about a moment ago, which is the longitudinal data, because that's the secret sauce. The way to connect billions of people and all of professional providers, because we have to do it all, otherwise it will not work, is tailored clinical biological ages. And looks like that no matter who I talk to, it resonates. It can be industry giants like the top 10 in NASDAQ that have that in their roadmap. Can you imagine? 2 years ago, who would have heard of biological age, right? Now I'm talking to you about every AI company has this on their roadmap. Well, you know what they also have? They have the challenge that they decided not to do it clinical grade. They want to do it from a wellness perspective. They don't necessarily at this moment in time want to involve physicians. Think of your favorite lifestyle provider, wearable, anything else. There isn't this vertical integration from doctor to lifestyle, from lifestyle to doctor continuously. And the real optimal way to do it is to speak the same language. So what do I mean? Florence is able to look at longitudinal data, which is what doctors love, right? Because doctors are concerned when you're just showing them one point in time, which is most health databases in the world, because you might find a lot of correlation, which has nothing to do with our biology or medicine. It's not causation. When you have the opportunity to look at longitudinal 30 decades data, full medical records, it's so unique. You can really understand that human biology, human medicine, that how does for any individual the metabolic system ages from a clinical grade perspective, clinical biomarkers that has actions doctors know how to approach. How many biological ages do you know that doctors know how to look at and act upon? Metabolic health, immune health, cognitive health, heart health. Those are the 80%. And we now actually layer more, renal and further. We're modeling all of our organs. So when you go to the doctor, when you go to a movement expert, when you go to a restaurant, you know which of your organs needs the most attention, but not just as theory. Which biomarker is actually a needle mover? Which biomarker poses the opportunity that it can be a best match? Think of Tinder, the theater of habits. What you actually love to do, right? That your doctor would say, yeah, that's the organ that needs most attention. It has experiencing much more stress on your current function today. Alleviating that stress will clinical grade extend your health span, because it's the first organ that currently is expected to fail with clinical standards. And here's a habit you love. I managed to circle the sun 36 times. My biological age is more meaningful for my health, well under 30, okay? Metabolic, immune, cognition, under. Heart health, aging faster, 34 years old. Looking into clinical standards, the Framingham score, which is very biased, by the way, done 50 years ago, but we'll put it aside for a sec. It's not the sugar, it's not the glucose, it's a potential hypertension. Most doctors would actually say, where's A1C, where's steps? And that's what we do. We create a biological age, which includes lifestyle and clinical. But a classic GPT, right? Go to your doctor, go to ChatGPT. We'll tell you, okay, go to do the recommended by the CDC, do 150 minutes recommended by the gym. But darn it, it's almost 2026. Isn't it time that my doctor tells me something I want to hear that will actually resonate? What if I never went to the gym? What if I used to walk 8,000 steps a day, now I walk 4? Going back to a habit I love, reduces my heart risk by half, which is the main health topic, alleviate the stress from my function today, and all in a manner that is a clear priority for the doctor. It's clear that this is the main thing, that's the biomarker, and that's the habit. And it's not just another partial information addition, which will take doctors' time and therefore will not get into the clinic in practicality. So by having this full view, clinical biological age, it ties together clinical behavior, we have the opportunity. Now, how does it become tailored? How does the big AI companies or the Mayo, the Cleveland, the Well Health of the world are looking at it? They want to have their own biological age. And they're right. Because people in Tel Aviv, New York, Montreal, Berlin, all we have clients, active doctors using it. They eat different food. They breathe different air. They have different standards of care. You can go from New York to Montreal, become diabetic on the border because the regulators decided differently. And furthermore, different doctors don't just want Florence to uniquely keep them within evidence-based medicine. That's what we do best, right? That's why we actually get in clinics. They want to go double down on it and roam around with their own style. So there's not only normal, abnormal according to the regulator, which is key. They have optimal, suboptimal, and their methodology is being kept. And speaking of opportunities like Genics or Well Health, they have 40,000 practitioners that we're going to gradually embed with in order to keep their standards by the head doctor, Dr. Grant Meek. We need to have optimal, suboptimal ranges, and how do we want to apply them? And that's the key. Tailored clinical biological ages, it ties it together, gets me motivated, gets my doctor, gym expert on board, and I know that it's, while being based on huge data, the biggest there is, it's still super tailored to my city, my neighborhood, and also to me. Maybe I don't like anything about nutrition and I never listen to any advice on Monday morning. Florence knows that, and she can coach me in the way I want to be coached, but prescribed by my trusted team.
I don't want to say I'm stumped, but I have too many questions. So
let's go.
I have to reorder them. So, okay, well, let's start with this one. You mentioned the 40,000 practitioners in clinical grade, and so the partners that you selected, and I think he said, what did you say? We know Genics is one because we were talking to Kristen last week.
They're the OG, right? 30 decades of experience with longevity. Who can ask for a better partner?
Yeah, it was funny listening to her kind of recap when they were on 60 Minutes like 30 years ago, how it was considered fringe, and now here we are 30 years later, and Peter T is on, and well, guess what? It's frontier, and yeah, and it's really it was really interesting to get a front row seat to that journey. So I guess maybe that is a good jumping off point. Is I see you're working with Genics. I think you mentioned Well Health, but you've got quite a few other partners that are either launched or are launching. I think actually one of the things I did want to comment on was in terms of the end user and the consumer, which was the thread that kind of started that is yeah, you need better diet and exercise. Like, what does that even mean? Like, it feels so overwhelming, and I don't know where to start, and what am I supposed to do? Cardio or weight? It's like, what I've learned is the best exercise is, the one that you actually do, right? And
exactly.
So, right. So that's
friends.
Yeah. And, but it isn't just about, exercise. It's like, there is a way to, I also love that what you said was the Tinder of habits. Brilliant. I love that.
Thinking in terms of algorithms, that's how my brain works.
I know. I want to make sure I kind of emphasize that point, because there are these kind of, big outcomes that we want that require a robust habit, but then there are these like kind of atomic habits that get us there. Right. And so it's this like balance of, top down, the goal that I want, but then it's the day-to-day bottom up actions that, sometimes it doesn't even feel like you're moving, but to have that coach kind of provide the, I don't want to say motivation, I would say reassurance. Because then all of a sudden something, crystallizes, and, you realize you're not winded walking up the stairs, or your soreness is gone, or, you're all of a sudden your staying power from a cognition point of view is never ending. You're keeping up with your 3-year-old. That's one of my goals right now, to keep up with my 2-year-old daughter. And it's amazing how it shifts, right? Like, when I was younger, it's like, I want to get my PhD and go to the Olympics and, start a $1 billion tech company. And now I'm like, hey man, I just want to be around for my daughter, and I want to give her a PhD in her own body by the time she's 12. And, pull in all the learnings that, I've had from missteps and mistakes, pulling the learning that my wife has had from losing her father to cancer. She's a holistic nutritionist. So there's, how do you make this like accessible and onerous? Like, we've got our kind of family operating system, on the wall at the kitchen table. It's been evolving for the last few years. And so, coming back to the clinical care and the coaches that are going to support this, how have you gone about, choosing your partners over time? And, and then maybe we can go into more detail on Genics, since I know that's launching
Yeah.
any day now. And
Sure.
what are the clinicians saying? And this has gone from vision to the rubber hitting the road. And so yeah, what are you seeing?
Yeah. So, the way you choose your partners, I think it's like any opportunity in life. If you're open-minded for opportunities, you'll just find the type that you're looking for. So we were very excited that we first got engaged with Christy, and we're like, I really want a partner that is rooted into evidence-based medicine for decades. And that's just how we found Maccabi and Clalit, the largest HMOs in Israel, covering millions of people. And this is how we found Christy, because when somebody like that knocks on your door, you listen up. And I was so excited to learn what they need of us and to learn what the app needs to do, what Florence needs to be, what kind of data inputs is required. Basically, the answer is everything. So we can just drag and drop any piece of lab from anywhere in the world and read it with the accordingly regulated normalities in the locality. Learning from Christy and the amazing team of what is required to serve them has been a privilege. It was fun. We met plenty of times, had dinners, had hikes. It was just fun. But the team was also very excited to learn what it means to service and energetic clients best. And we want to be the best tech enabler for Christie's vision that I'm sure will continue to evolve and will be there to support. And two other really great partners I want to give really a big thanks. One is who we mentioned, Well Health Technologies. They're being one of the largest electronic medical records clinic management platform of the world. Very, very big in Canada, if not the biggest. Very big in the Middle East, in the Gulf countries. And serving them and being embedded, Florence being embedded within an electronic medical record at such caliber is a huge opportunity just to serve doctors, continue saving them time as we are right now. They're our best case study of how we save actual 50% of doctors of all kinds and of all flavors, right? That's the challenge. Not just prioritizing, not just adding information, actually trusting the results enough to advise on what needs to be done in a longevity plan term, getting that beautiful book about you in the end. People love that. I'm such a tech geek that I didn't get it in the beginning. Like, why would they want a preview report? Like, why not just an app? And then we printed it and it was a hit. We said, forget the app. We want the book about you to look like that and to speak of that. And so that was a learning experience with Well Health, and they're super talents, 2 times unicorn builders. They built this one in 5 years, tech enablers, amazing ones, learning their needs, and they're very technical. Actually, clinic management platform services is huge for us to learn, and I'm excited for this opportunity. The third one that you asked about clients and how we choose them. So that was an interesting one. Just when we were raising the round, we were about to sign with an investor, and he was thinking about it. And then that client said, "You know what? I'm in." After a call, and I'm like, "Okay, let's go." Done. And Ellen Kwasha, he's a super talented person. Did a big fortune with his own 10 fingers and his amazing family and partners. And he has this beautiful vision of the new standard of care. He just wouldn't have it. The incentives are not aligned. It pains him that, he owns and controls so many clinics and hospitals and institutions. And he just sees that giving great care for people is not necessarily the immediate interest of insurance, government. And if you want to be aligned for our members, for our patients, helping them gaining extra 2 healthy years, at least. And luckily, 2 healthy years is the same as lifetime of health years, because aging is accumulated damage. That's the beautiful thing about longevity. It's treating your body right now better is one of the best things you can do for health in the long term. It's just like any machine. And aligning their interests, creating the new standards of care, new standards for biological ages, metabolic health, immune health, cognitive health, is his vision. So when we met, it was just like, I was just so eager to learn about the market, how it actually works, and how our biological agents can serve his portfolio. Has been an amazing experience. And we just opened soft launch the clinic in the Bahamas. That's gonna, I invite all of our listeners who are in the business or just want to try out an amazing clinic. But if you have a new device, a lab that you want to work with an amazing network of professionals. So this is the first one that will define the new standard of care and have a good chance of being proliferated across the states.
And that was Well Health.
So I talked in the beginning about Genics, then Well Health, and the last one is Quadrant Management, an amazing group of people that they just know how to get it done, which is so important in the medical industry today in the United States.
Amazing. Now, I got a question for you about, you mentioned clinical grade, and I've had Nathan Price, the Buck Institute, on a few times now. And then I was able to have the godfather of systems biology and scientific wellness, and that was Lee Hood. So of Phenome Health, and really exciting the work that they're doing, and the systems biology paradigm of thinking, right? And one of the the interesting things that I've seen, I'm sure that you've seen, is there are these great scientists who are on the frontier, like creating new models in theory and testing them clinically. And then there's this lag to like the kind of commercial dissemination of the insight. I mean, a great example is, Nathan and Lee. It's like they have a ton of insights that aren't, ready or might be ready, but there are steps between the approval, but then there's also steps between like the technical implementation, right? And, as you said, like how you frame the analysis is very important. And as it turns out, it's like, hey, you can just change borders and, now you're pre-diabetic, whereas you weren't. Where you weren't 5 meters before, so there's this emergent, I call it, model garden that exists. And I think that's in a way like what you're empowering, Cenegenics in a way, because there's a Cenegenics way of doing it. There's a Quadrant Management way of doing it. There's a Well Health way of doing it. And those are all informed by, scientific insights and not just correlation.
Physicians that have an amazing protocol they want to proliferate across their organization.
Right. And so like imagine that you kind of take all those models and they're centralized, right? So it's like you kind of build a model stack, right? That's, because why don't we stand on the shoulders of giants if we can? I think there's like, like a great resource, for example, is the open catalog for PRS. You'd probably come across apologetic risk score, and there's like thousands of models, right? And you can compete and calibrate those models, and so that the future is kind of like this hugging face for biomarker biology, if you will, and so we have this chance now to openly compete these models insofar as not just the better and the best, but even, you want to talk about saving 10 billion or adding 10 billion years of health span. Part of that, it has to do with, I think there's low hanging fruit right now. Absolutely. And then also like, how do we like create a flywheel and bring in new insights at the speed of thought, for example. And so, do you have any collaboration with those model makers? Like, have you thought about how you might, obviously you're delivering on the commercial side of today, but is there kind of some bridging that you've thought about between the, the academics and the science and the commercialization? Because those folks are often, two different skill sets. Sure. And actually Lee Hood pointed to is like, well, Araval is a very successful company in terms of like what we learned in publishing papers, but economically it wasn't viable. And a lot of that had to do with, the same best practices in academia aren't necessarily best practices in commercialization, and the best commercialization practices aren't necessarily the most robust, most, best quality. But if that could become an iterative process, and just for one more thing for context, like when I did this with human performance models, I had to create the models from scratch. I had to build all the technical infrastructure. I had to build all the labs, logistics, et cetera. And it took me, 18 months and $2 million before I even sold the kit, right? And I think that kind of whole frame, can now be amortized. And I think that like there's an opportunity to share models, like a licensing of models, if you could imagine. And at the same time, the clinician still kind of owns the IP because they can model stack, right? So anyway, that's kind of this model garden, scenario that I've seen emerging. Whereas when I did this 10 years ago, I would have been like, well, my team has the best science. And I thought we did in terms of what we were doing, but that's temporary. I had a team of like 20 grad students, and their sole focus was to manually curate literature on human performance, DNA and genetics and physiology, and update it regularly. But the peer review process is much wider and open, and so how do you integrate the whole body of open sourced research, but then also provide incentives for more kind of proprietary models. So I think what I'm talking about might be a little bit future pacing, but I know how you think, and I'm sure something like this has come up in your mind.
Absolutely.
And it's wonder if any of that resonated with you.
I love this agenda because this is basically how do we accelerate longevity research? How do we get people to actually enjoy the cutting edge proven research today? Because many people would really appreciate using the cutting edge treatment for their families, and they would do a lot for it. So how do we bridge that gap, shorten it, and make it visible, your menu of options? So I think that there's a couple of things here. First, you mentioned all your esteemed guests, and the Buck Institute is amazing. I'm just going to travel there in a couple of weeks for the beautiful conference. I invite everybody. I think it's going to be really interesting to learn what scientists came up with this year, and I know some stuff that are.
What's the date on that conference? Remind me.
5 to 8. You should look up a longevity clinics table. Yeah.
December 5 to 8.
I think so.
Okay.
I highly recommend it. We're going to be there. And the interesting thing is, a lot of clinicians are actually taking pride on their protocol. And for us longevity people, it's obvious, but to have it, to hear it from traditional doctors is really refreshing. And the beautiful thing about their protocol, think about it. What does it depend on? What kind of tests they're doing? What kind of therapies and devices they're applying? And that's like the fingerprint of a clinic. You wouldn't be able to replicate the same doctor, the same devices, the same labs, again, the same air, the same food around that population, right? You wouldn't be able to replicate it even if you wanted to. And if you wanted to, you might as well do it for your own clinic. So there's no conflict of IP. It's just, doing the Apple metabolic health, the Google metabolic health, the Samsung metabolic health are all going to yield different formulas for their people. And guess what? You should make it different for San Francisco and San Diego, and the Buck Institute in San Francisco. They're on a little mountain there, so even they have their own unique sub version of the model. So the beautiful thing that there's no IP conflict. Like tailoring it for a specific establishment is a big honor, and that's theirs. And if somebody wants to use the out-of-the-box solution that we provided with the largest HMOs, which is what doctors want to see, the decades-long data, that's the foundation. So they can use it. So whenever we meet a new clinic, whether it's their own proprietary data that can go in the tailored clinical biological ages, and usually it also comes with specific paper they want Florence to emphasize. How do you bridge the gap when you want to lower the A1C? Like some people would say, well, it's mostly about food. Others will say it's mostly about cardio. Some people will say, well, if you're not sleeping well, how will you have the willpower for any of those? Many of the doctors do a mix, of course, but they have their own methodology and they have their own therapeutics, tests. Some do sleep labs, some don't. It really differs. So applying those list of papers, applying that data set, and then creating their own clinical ages is the best gift you can give to that clinic, to those people, to communicate with their doctors in a clinical but fun manner that actually applies to a great lifestyle they love. But it also doesn't compete, because a clinic in another city or across the street that uses different devices will anyway want something which is tailored.
Got it. Yeah, this was a conversation that came up on one of my, earlier conversations in the 20s and 30s, I think, when I met with Mike Pulcori, the chief architect of former chief architect of 23andMe. So yeah, he left, kind of well before all the struggles, but he was there, in the beginning to build the infrastructure, to support those, 10 million users and give them the health sets and develop these, polygenic risk scores, gene panels. And I think one of the struggles that, he was frustrated by was like what you're now solving today, which is there's so much information on the table that, wasn't readily available to consumers, and maybe the consumer channel wasn't the best, but then the practitioners weren't necessarily as technically savvy or as, I don't know, early adopters as the kinds of customers that they're getting. So anyway, it's this very careful balance of like who wants to use these omics as an end user should. I mean, like, let's be clear, there are certain kind of first principles of health that need to be in order before you kind of layer in this complex system. But then again, I'm not so sure, because in the case of your father and my mother, it's like, well, actually, if you could speak in a way that they could hear you, right? And that, what I mean by that is, to them, it's like, okay, well, you have MS or you have lung cancer, or, I often cite Stephen Jay Gould, who's an epic evolutionary biology professor at Harvard University, great thinker and explainer of evolutionary biology, and really was like kind of the whole organism model versus the gene-centric model compared to his counterparts like your Richard Dawkins, et cetera. Like, there is some intelligence in the organism, but not to go into philosophically at this point. I think what's more practically relevant is he developed I can't remember the name of it, but some kind of a stomach cancer, ironically, probably as a result of being in the asbestos contaminated Harvard basement library. That was never confirmed, so I shouldn't say that it was. I mean, I just read it somewhere, and I might be perpetuating false information I don't want to do. But the point that is relevant is, when he got that diagnosis, he was given a probability, and he was given of lifespan with this disease and diagnosis, and the probability was based on averages, right? So on average, compared to people with this kind of cancer, he had a few years. And then when he started actually segment the data to men who are in their mid 40s,
steps do they take? How do they sleep? What kind of medication do they take? What kind of viruses do they have? That's a different segment, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And you can look at weird segments. That's a beautiful thing.
So suffice it to say, he went from a couple of years to, I think, 2 or 3 decades, right? And he wasn't super techie. He was just very curious, and he had access to information, right? And I don't think you need to be, I mean, I think you need to be curious, insofar as, like, if you hear the prognosis, say, okay, well, how did you get to that? Help me understand it. And maybe that's the point of empowerment, is like, well, hold on, let's see where that diagnosis came from. What side of the border were you on, to use your example. And then the point of empowerment, I think it is critical, like the guide, certainly. And then, there's the to what extent, or to what arena, what are the different arenas, and what are the different guides that go into the arenas, right? Like a high performance athlete, versus, an elderly individual in a long-term care facility. It's still the arena of life, right? And there's still quality to be had. And I think the quality comes back. Well, it's really no different than, you know what I mean? I think it's dignity at a I think what we're finding here is dignity at a technologic. We're using technology to restore dignity, right? And what I mean by that is, I'm treating you as the sacred individual you are. And I
feel health. You don't need other people to tell you what to do. You should be involved in the plan, and you should be the decision maker of what works.
Yeah. And I think that's just it. Is I'm actually communicating, or maybe what don't let me put words in your mouth, but maybe what longevity is able to do is to communicate the value of your life and the actionability of the life, the health span extension, in a way that people not only hear it, but are motivated to act on it. Because some things are just so overwhelming. You're like, oh, okay, look, my mom said, well, I have MS. And it's like, that's that, rather than, okay, you got this thing that's making, there's this, something's making you feel inflamed and tired and frustrated and your extremities are numb and you're not performing like you want to. People are calling that MS. We're going to go a little deeper and we're going to start there. But we know all diseases are, especially these chronic ones, can be attributed to some extent, as you had said, is this gradual accumulation of what did you say? You said, I can't remember what you said. It's something like the accumulated damage, right? And so, great. Well, let's stop accumulating more damage and let's see if any of this damage might be restored. And the restoration is unique to the kind of damage that you've suffered. So, for example, bad analogy, but like let's in really superficial. It's like imagine your car. It got some. It's just auto body damage. So it's okay. It slammed in on the passenger door, front passenger door, and you go in, and they're like, no, the trunk looks fine. That part of the body looks fine. So you're not even looking at it. You're not even seeing it. I mean, it is ridiculously silly, but
because if you measure it, let's say I like this analogy. If you measure the brakes, it's great, but it's deteriorating over time, and you can measure it. Look at your A1C. It might be great, but if you're looking at the trend, and in 3 years you might become pre-diabetic, we can let you know that this is that's your needle mover. That's the one thing you can act on that will give you more health years, and by the way, will make you feel better today. Because guess what? Lower A1C is better if it's now rising for you. So saying that it's not a disease, which is in some cases an arbitrary number that a board decided in some country, and it might be different. There's a lot of logic to it because we need new treatments and it's worth the side effects of drugs. But it doesn't mean it's not a continuous deterioration of the system that you can, in some cases, reverse. And looking at it as the continuum that we are, as the machine that we are, as a different system that are always playing together, and one system breaks, well, it's not good news for the others. So helping each system stay in line is probably the best thing you can do as the CEO of your own health. And that's what we should expect from ourselves. We have the information, we have the technology. Next year, I have no doubt the doctor will speak to us in a much more tailored, personal way. And we'll be expected to make a decision. Do we care about our health? Are we happy to do this one habit that we will enjoy that will give us the best of health? And I think everybody should make this decision and say, I need to have one good, healthy habit improving this 2026. And technology can give it to you so quick with a doctor, and great wellness, great advice if you just download the app, that, why not do it?
So coming back to being on mission here, you've onboarded all these practitioners. What is your end reach right now? Would you say ballpark? Like, what would you guess? How many people are either using or are positioned to be using longevity AI in, say, 2026?
26 is an interesting year. Also 27, I think it's monumental year for AI in general. I think 26, we're going to see, let's talk about the market and then how it's going to happen. So what if we're going to see in 2026 is convergence of AI? People talk about the bubble of AI, just like the bubble.com. I actually agree. I think AI is going to fundamentally change humanity, just like the internet did. And I think that the companies that deliver clear value on day one, saving time is a great metric. Giving extra health is a great metric. Companies that can demonstrate real value will survive. And just like the .com, companies that are just on the hype, but if you look under the hood, well, it's not delivering that value at that moment. They might not survive 26. And the reason is, it's not that the financial market is less sustainable when it's inflated, etc. It's not even that. I think it's just about human behavior, which, by the way, is, I think, the way I read it, is the source of any economics. Think of your phone. Think of the top 10 apps you're actually using. This is an exclusive club, isn't it? When was the last time your app managed to get in? Well, if you're really thinking of those 10 apps, you might find an app from your trusted services, from your bank, from your doctor, health provider, right? You wouldn't like to give just any AI your clinical information, right? What we said, where I slept last night, how am I feeling, what am I happy with about my health, what am I happy with about myself, how do I cope with life, what are my challenges. Just like in legal tech, a company would like to give all of their contracts to read by AI by 10 different ones. It's just exposure. So I think edge AI being calculated on device, not leaving the device, is going to be a standard. Apple, that's their go-to, and I completely agree with Apple on that. That's the only key to real privacy with AI. Secondly, you wouldn't just give it to any AI. You would just go with the one that you've been provided by, the one you trust. If I provide that doctor, I'm going to use that app. So that's our vision of delivering 10 billion healthy years, is by delivering great value for doctors, saving time as they measurably give better care. So by doing that, and by seeing that the industry will converge in 2026, we really want to make sure we are leading with institutions. So serving a big portion of Canadians. We want to serve a big portion of Americans. We're having a couple of big health networks now that we're talking with. And we're also interested in Europe, Middle East. We're very proud to serve Israelis. And we currently have in our discussions, contracts, 200,000 practitioners. And that's way more than we need for our financials. And it's going to propel us a lot faster, which I think is what we need for 2027. I think 27 is going to be a critical year for humanity. I think that, if I ask every listener now to close their eyes for a second and imagine 27, many of us will think that we will be engaging significantly, increasingly with AI in our daily lives. Groceries, how we think, how we email, how we talk to our health providers, bankers, lawyers, colleagues, family, right? I still like to write my own birthday greetings by hand, and I think I'm like being old school about that. But that means that AI will navigate a lot of our decision making, as you pointed out, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. And AI will be so powerful that we'll have like a network of connections and knowledge and influence about our lives, about our governments, about the world, about regulations, about legal, medical, construction, any area of life. And in that moment in time, the AI that we trust, because it's true, because it's private, because it's secure, it works for me. It's not working for any kind of mogul or entity or politician. I think this will be a criteria for people to choose. And what is economy if not the sum of people's choices? So in that moment in time, in 27, I think there's going to be a shift. I think that the AIs that deliver what we perceive as truth, and hopefully evidence-based medicine for that's the science of truth for our body, right? Evidence-based medicine, that's what we have. So modeling that, keeping it safe and secure, trusted by doctors, governments. Governments need longevity. Governments need people to stay functional. People are getting older. We need people to continue being functional in society. Aligning all these interests, I think, is what's going to take to deliver worldwide services. And it's not just about a specific number. I think it's going to be a very few take-it-all scenario. So we're planning for that. And that's why Edge AI and making sure we're aligned with practitioners is the strategy for 26.
So 100,000 practitioners in conversation with, and so the goal is 200,000, I beg your pardon. In conversation with 200,000, and then so guess at the end of 2027, what are you thinking on end users?
That's a good question. I think we'll be more consumer oriented by then. I think that you always need a doctor to go clinical. But I think that getting people to do that first step is so important, and we can help so many people and basically help them find the doctor that serves them best, because clinical is clinical. You cannot beat clinical. We will never want to replace a doctor. I wouldn't like to get my medical advice by anybody else except for a doctor, my doctor. But I would like to get some wellness advice about what works for me. So I think that 27 will speak more in consumer numbers. And consumer numbers, I wouldn't like to give the number just right now here, but think how many consumers are being treated by a doctor a year.
Yeah. So maybe I should have prefaced with why I was asking those questions, because what I really wanted to
It's a lot of
understand.
numbers. Some
Yeah,
people
well,
just listen up for longevity. I'm talking numbers.
yeah. Well, I mean, I was, going back to your goal, right? Is 10 billion years, right?
Mhm.
So how many years do you think we'll have added by 2027?
That's a very good question. And it's not something that, it's a goal that we have. And I hope we can be halfway by end of 27.
Wow. Okay. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I was going to give you an out there, but
I gave an out about the finance, but what's dear to heart is actually the healthy years.
yes. Well, I mean, that's the North Star, right? And the finance is a KPI and a byproduct, as you said, astutely put. What was it that you said? You said economics. What is economics if not the sum of people's choices? And so, can it become economical? Can there be an economical signature of more tender habits that are good
Yeah.
for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Guy, I want to be conscientious of your time. I promised you 3 questions. Actually, I'm wondering
Yes.
if that person that you said you were going to recommend at the beginning that I'm now asking you has changed. And so those 3 questions, if this was your last podcast, what do we want people to hear? Who do we want to hear it? Who are those people that got to hear it? And then number 3, who would you recommend as my next guest to host on the DNA of Things?
All right. So I'll start with the last one. I think that it's such a privilege that you were talking to Christy Berry. I always enjoy spending time with her. And then it might comes to mind with Dr. Grant Meek. He's leading the medical side of Well Health Technologies. I'm learning a lot from him every day about how to serve the out-of-pocket market, the public market, so different. It's really a brilliant mind. And talking with him was a pleasure. So I highly recommend. You asked what would be a message that I would like to send out, right? I think that everything that we're building here, all the bits and bytes and codes, is all for one thing. Longevity is a decision. Our ability to deliver longevity for all is to help people understand that gaining a better life that feels great today and that is clinically proven to give them healthier years is within their grasp. They just need to make a choice. They can download our app. They can download any habit building app. They can go to their doctor and ask for a blood panel. They can ask their doctor if they work with us. It doesn't really matter. Just making a choice that you care about being proactive, that's half the deal. So I encourage, if I have one message, that's the message. Make a choice today to gain one healthy habit in 26. And if you want to wisely choose one, ask your doctor.
Amazing. Let's end with that and post this as close to New Year's as possible.
Or for a healthy new choice for next year.
New year, new you. All right, brother Guy, thank you so much for taking the time today. Always a honor and a pleasure. And you know what? I'm already looking forward to round 3, and we'll be able to go back to that metric of 5 billion and come at you for an update. All right.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much for having today. Great honor.
Thank you so much.
As we've heard from Guy Leitersdorf today, the patterns that define our health span don't need to be a mystery. They are written in our data and visible to those with the courage and the resources to look. As Guy stated, longevity is a decision for those privileged to make it so. And so, is this a choice to act on? And we do this with the information that is readily available within our grasp. Now, his mission is to give humanity 10 billion additional healthy years. This is more than a moonshot. It is direct challenge to upgrade a system from sick care to well care. This is a declaration that a proactive, healthier future is possible right now. And we're thankful for Guy as our guest today, who has identified potentially where this code is broken and the evidence being undeniable. And the question remains is one that you now face is, what will you do with the knowledge you now carry?